Actually, first of all, big shout out to Reed Corporate. Thanks very much for putting on the conference. Fantastic opportunity to come and talk to everybody. Special shout out to Paul. Paul does a lot of work on our corporate side, and quite frankly, if he's a bit taller or blonder and spoke Swedish, he'd actually be even more useful to us. But he's a good man anyway. And thank you, actually, ladies and gentlemen, to you guys as well. I mean, you've heard a lot today from Hedley, from Pete, from others in terms of how frustrating it is for us at the small end of the market cap of resources companies. So it's really great to be able to get out and tell you the stories. There's a lot of good stories out there today, and hopefully you'll enjoy this one as well. Oh. So here we go. So so we're up in Sweden. As Kerry mentioned, we've got two projects up there that we're exploring. Sweden's a really interesting place. A lot of people throw around that word of a tier 1 mining jurisdiction, but Sweden's really interesting. It's to me, it's right time, right place in Sweden. It's one of the biggest mining economies in Europe. It's got a really long mining history there. A lot of things you hear about Sweden is about how green it is. And before, when I went over there for the very first time, I half expected Greta Thunberg to turn up to the airport and tell me I wasn't welcome. But when you start to talk to politicians and the like, they're very pragmatic about the role that mining plays in that green transition. And you're talking in a place like Sweden, where 98% of their electricity already comes from renewable sources. So, to talk to people that understand mining and how mining fits into that green transition is really refreshing. We've got a great team. The team here in Australia is responsible. Or I suppose what the strategy is down here is to sort of find old mines in the strategy that ultimately new mines will be found around the old mines. And you heard from Darren Stralo this morning about Bellevue. The team that behind this company was also behind Bellevue. And again, the success that they've had there and what that mine will ultimately be is a fantastic proving up of the strategy that we're following. Also, what's really important is the in-country team, what I call the secret sauce. Eric Lundström is the ex-chief geologist of Boliden, one of the biggest mining companies in Europe. He was responsible for getting these projects into the company, and he's been wandering that ground for sort of 20 and 30 years, responsible for numerous discoveries up there, including the extensions at Garpenberg, which is the very big Boliden mine in the area. But ultimately, it comes down to the projects, and literally, I still scratch my head a little bit in terms of how this company could put their foot on two such historically significant projects. I'm a bit of a history buff, but these projects actually made Sweden a superpower back in the late 1600s. Falun is 1,000 years old. It was for many hundreds of years the largest copper producer in the Western world. The copper roof on Versailles comes from Falun. This was a major mine back in its time. It produced 28 million tonnes at 4% copper and 4 grams per tonne gold and 5% zinc. When you I mentioned that example of Bellevue before, that's equivalent to sort of 10 million ounces at 10 grams per tonne. It's a major operation back in its time. And really, the old timers only sort of touched just the very outskirts of it. We've now got sort of 312 kilometres there and 60 kilometres of very prospective strike length. And we're really, of all the work that we've done so far, we're pretty convinced that there's a 10-kilometre highly mineralised corridor there, just waiting for us to put some holes into it. Sala, again, really interesting. For hundreds of years was one of the largest, highest grade silver mines in Europe. You're talking 200 million ounces of silver at 1,244 grams a tonne. If you can see anything like that anywhere else, I'll be amazed. And up to 7,000 grams a tonne. I mean, that is, when you look at things like Adriatic out there, which is, again, a fantastic operation looking to come into production shortly, they've got 12 million tonnes at 375 grams per tonne silver equivalent, and they're capped at 800 million. We're at 20. As I say, $20 million for where we are. From what I've sort of told you, it's quite extraordinary from the assets that we got with it, but we capped it there at 20 million. But you've sort of heard enough about that today. So a little bit about Sweden before I sort of start. I've mentioned before, the long mining history and how important mining is to that economy. One of the things I looked at in my due diligence about coming into Sweden was about, some of the things that came up was how long the approvals took to sort of get what you were looking for. And that's true up there in the north. Up in the north there is where the Sami people are, where the reindeer herding is, right up there near the Arctic Circle. But we are down here in the Bergslagen region. And here you can see some very major VMS systems in terms of Zinkgruvan, which is Lundin, and Garpenberg here, which is Boliden. And so Garpenberg actually perfectly bisects where we are at Sala and at Falun. Sala is only an hour out of Stockholm. When I went there, they sort of said we'd be taking the back roads up there and be prepared for a couple of hours in the car. I drive over the Harbour Bridge in Sydney and there's potholes going over there. No such thing when you're driving those back roads in Sweden, let me tell you. So, it's a fantastic place where you are. The infrastructure's amazing. You're in a mining community. Again, when you talk to the politicians over there, there's a concern with opening up new mining areas. But as I've mentioned to you, around this area, they've been mining for thousands of years. Not just 1,000 years, but thousands of years. There are deposits where we are at Falun that have been going for 2,000 years. So it's just when you start to get your head around that history, it's amazing. And when I sort of said right time, right place, so you probably read about Europe and where Europe is at the moment, and this and the whole Russian situation that's going on there. Like, there's a real push over there for self-sufficiency in minerals. At the moment, Europe uses about 20% of the world's commodity and produces 3%. So where do you get that other 17%? Sweden, interestingly enough, is the president of the EU at the moment. So you talk to them about how actually Sweden can sort of contribute more to that situation. And so you've really got, a very receptive government. And, there's been a change of government there quite recently in terms of a more, more to the right, more nationalistic. And so having these conversations about how Sweden can become more self-sufficient in commodities and continue to push that forward gets a very, very good reception. And as I said, Sweden is just about to give up 200 years of neutrality. They're about to join NATO. I mean, that's a massive change in Sweden. Again, the whole Russian situation there is, a lot of the Swedish people actually see themselves on the front line of that conflict. And again, this whole nationalistic thing and becoming more self-sufficient is something that they're very focused on. But about Falun, as I mentioned previously, there's this 10-kilometre corridor that we're very focused on. Eric's been wandering this area for numbers of years now, and all of these red dots there are the ore horizons that he's mapped. I mean, all of that. Again, I talked about these VMS systems before, the zinc, silver, lead systems, and that's exactly what we have here. It's all the mineralisation that we see there is that. But what we're actually looking for there, when we look for those new Faluns, are these elevated copper-gold structures. I mean, you look at Falun here, and it's this tiny little dot here. It's 200 by 100 across and 500 deep. That's that 28 million tonnes at 4% that I was talking about. Those three Bellevues fit into that tiny little space there. We then put down our first hole here out at Whitgruven, and we hit 43 metres of sulphide. That is the first hole in this 3.5 kilometre trend leading out from Falun. This mine closed in 1992, and nothing has happened there since. It's just crying out for exploration and crying out for the application of some modern technologies. I'll talk about that hole a little bit more in due course, but for us to sort of we've got a massive EM program going on here at the moment. Like, we've got so many targets we could be drilling today, but when it comes back to your balance sheet and you've got $4 million in the bank, every hole absolutely counts. We're very focused on, this whole thing of small resources going out there and continuing to dilute shareholders. That's just not the way we want to operate. And so it's all about, hitting those right targets. So it's a big EM program coming up for us to absolutely get the right targets. That first hole that we put down, absolutely amazing. So we hit 43 metres of sulphides here. And look, I'm no geo, but you can't tell me underneath this old mine that closed in sort of 1908 that this doesn't sort of continue down here. But that's not the exciting part of this story. Like, the exciting part of this story is this off-hole conductor here. As I mentioned to you, all great being in that mineralisation, but we're looking for those high-grade copper-gold. Pods is the wrong word because they're bigger than that. But again, if that is another Falun, then, as I say, this company's worth a hell of a lot more than 20 million. We put down one more hole there. All I said to Eric is don't miss, but you know, that's the way it goes in mining, they tell me, in exploration, that you do miss those things every now and again. But the really interesting thing about that hole, while we didn't hit the target, we hit 8 metres of this copper stringer zone, which we know sits in the footwall of Falun. So we are able to sort of further define what that conductor looks like, and gives us more confidence that you know, we should be excited about that hole. We got so excited about that hole in Falun that you know, at the time when we drilled that, we didn't actually own this piece, which is the old Falun mine. So we went and bought that for what I think will ultimately prove to be the bargain basement price of a couple of $100,000. And we got a 1,400 hole database with all of that. And I tell you, when you start to look at some of those intersections that we've got on there, so you can sort of see 11 metres at 60 grams per tonne gold, you can see 6 metres at 4% copper, 5 metres at 5% copper. I mean, it sort of blows your mind a little bit. And when you sort of look at, you know, as I said, that tiny little area that is Falun, and these areas that we're now starting to open up, the opportunities around Falun are just massive. And again, the old story, you know, look for a new mine where there was an old mine. So again, so for us, we're now sort of in the putting together a very detailed program in terms of, you know, when we ultimately start drilling. As I said, it's very exciting for us in terms of that conductor that we've got there at Whitgrooven. We got left with 4 really interesting gravity anomalies from Drake Resources, who held this before us. Again, no drill holes into those things, but, you know, and I sort of said we've already got a lot of targets, you put holes in those things tomorrow. Until you then ultimately get to Falun. And, you know, again, a lot of those intercepts that we've got there are showing that, you know, the mineralisation extends into mining voids, that, and so the opportunity there again is just massive. For a small budget, we just got to get it right. We got to make sure that every hole we put in here is going to hit some mineralisation, and so we're doing a lot of work on that at the moment. Before we get really started, I'd love to have sort of 5, 6, 7,000 metres all lined up, ready to go, and then approvals just continuing to sort of follow on from that as, you know, once we get started. Now, I get very excited about this, but when I first started with the company, we were at Sala here, and Sala, as I mentioned to you, was 200 million ounces of silver at just phenomenal grades. And, you know, before I joined, the guys had sort of put together a 10 million tonne resource there. You know, there's no doubt in my mind there's ultimately a mine here. For me, though, it's all about, with a limited budget, how do you get a re-rating of this company and back to a level where we can raise money at sort of sensible levels to do this exploration. And so, as I say, whether it's 10 million tonnes, 20 million tonnes, you know, I don't know. There's no, you know, what our geologists are saying is this ore body is going to continue under the old pit and up here north. But when I talk to Eric and get really excited about this silver, I said, that's all fantastic. You know, we can continue to do that. But the more holes we put in and extend the resource, you know, that's hard. That doesn't really excite the market. But if you get me some more silver at 1,000 grams a tonne, they're going to be excited. So, you know, when we start looking around, it's areas like over here where you've sort of got the anticlines that are sort of proving as traps for that mineralisation. And you look at sort of rock chips here of almost 1,500 grams per tonne. You know, this again is crying out for us to do some significant work over here. The EM that works really well at Falun doesn't work quite so well here, and we do have to rely on Eric's understanding of the geology in terms of where we put those drill holes. But if, again, as I say, if we can get some of that high-grade silver, you know, that's going to change this potential opportunity and change the outlook for the company quite substantially. I put this up, you know, I always have a bit of a laugh because I don't have young people helping me. I used to be a banker and I have all these young guys sort of drawing beautiful graphs, but you have to put up with your own very limited understanding of PowerPoint. But this is what we've got at Sala, and this is the old Garpenberg, if you like. And Eric, my good friend, sort of put a massive hole along here and identified all of these, all of the things that you couldn't see with EM. You know, this mine is now down at 1,400 metres. You know, but what I've showed you at Sala is down at 300, Falun itself down at 500. And so, because you were nasty, I'm going to keep talking. No. And so, you know, the opportunity that you had there at Garpenberg, again, the potential that we've got there at Sala, I think is amazing. Big high-grade system there at Sala as well. And again, you know, you've got a lot of opportunities to look at here at this conference, a lot of great stories out there. what I'd like you to remember about Alicanto and to consider, I think Sweden is a really interesting place to be, and I think things are changing there at such a rapid rate that I really do feel it's right time, right place to have a mine up there in Europe and particularly in Sweden. 2 brownfields projects that haven't been touched in quite some significant time. To put some modern exploration over the top of that is going to be really, really interesting for us. And look, we got the right team to do it. So I'm pretty excited. I wouldn't have joined the company otherwise. So, please watch and see how we go. Thanks, guys.